I'm Michael Anderson. I've been here 31 years in Nevada County. I have an IT company called ClientWorks. Been doing that for 21 years. And before that, I was working at the Grass Valley Group. And for those of you who know the history of the Grass Valley Group, that's a lot of the reason that we have a high-tech community in Nevada County. So, back in 2014, I had the opportunity to work with John Paul with Spiral, and did that for about 3.5, almost 4 years. And then because of not being able to get investors, he sold that to a company called Race Communications, who is going to build that network. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about tonight is based on my experiences helping to design and prepare to build that network. It helped me get a really good understanding of the broadband ecosystem. And speaking of which, how many people are familiar with this book? One person, another person, and another person. So, Susan Crawford is, in my opinion, the premier expert in broadband in the United States. She wrote a couple of books, one about smart cities, another about the history of cable networks in the 60s, and her whole focus is on broadband as a mechanism of social justice. So in other words, it's like when electricity or the highway system wasn't getting everywhere, things were done to get it everywhere. And the reason it had to get everywhere is because people needed it in order for there to be economic growth and for there to be the ability for people to start companies and prosper. So we are at that time with fiber and with broadband. We're on the cusp of a revolution. The title of this book is Fiber, the Coming Tech Revolution, and Why America Might Miss It. So that's what we're going to be talking a little bit about tonight, is why America might miss it if we don't get this figured out. In the year 2000, we were #1 in broadband for speed and price. We are now about number 18 in the world. That's not a good idea. We need to do better than that. China is eating our lunch currently in the fiber world. We have currently fiber to the premise with 6% of the premises in the United States, and in China is 16% and growing very, very quickly. That is not a sustainable situation. You know, dial-up used to be considered broadband, right? The current speed in the laboratory for a single mode fiber is 661 terabits per second. That's how fast they have it working in the laboratory, and that's being pushed. It's going to be in petabits and who knows where. We have not hit the limits of the physics yet with fiber. So people talk about the web and discuss it in terms of versions. So this is before Web.1. This is what I have decided to call Web 0.0. So are those devices familiar to anybody? Anybody can recognize those, right? We got an Apple Lisa. I worked at Apple Computer in the late 80s and installed those for people. And we had a rudimentary DSL circuit is how we connected those. And so it was 10 megabits per second over copper wire. All the buildings were connected. And they had a phone that plugged into the Apple Lisa, and their phone worked over that. It's quite brilliant. Proprietary technology. It was a company called David Systems. That's 3270 over there. IBM connected to mainframes on the right, or excuse me, on the left. And that's a coax technology. So, and then here we have the Usenet, right? Before the web. So, here's, hello? So there's Web 1.0, Netscape Navigator, right? We have over here the first Wikipedia. Alta Vista is the search before Google. GeoCities was the how to build websites before WordPress, right? So this is basically brochures on your screen, pretty much. Not very interactive, if at all, and very flat, page after page, but it was transformational. I remember working at the Grass Valley Group when I first saw this on some Spark 1 color stations. And I was like, wow, I can go here, I can put, something like red wagons in, and then there's some stuff about red wagons. I went, okay, this is gonna make a big difference. And I brought friends who weren't in the tech business into Grass Valley, when I did backups on Saturdays, hey, come here, look, check this out, this is amazing. So this was amazing. There was no doubt about it. And, so it did its thing, it kind of worked its way through, and then we got to Web 2. And Web 2 is where the iPhone showed up, and the smartphone. And the smartphone gave us these transformational technologies that were based on mobile. And so then that's when the interaction started happening, right? And all those things there on the right just completely destroyed businesses. The business models for lots of things, like retail businesses started to be affected. Certainly paper maps went away. You don't see much of those. Travel agents, I mean, the list it goes on and on. One of my favorites is FlightAware. Does anybody have FlightAware on their phone? It's one of my favorite apps. So if you're talking to somebody who, and I hope there's nobody here who believes in chemtrails, right? Because frankly, you can literally pull up your phone, and if there's a plane going overhead, you can, look at it and say, okay, it took off from here, it's going to land there, it's at this altitude, and it's going to land, and it's going to go to gate 37. And it's amazing. So that's the kind of interaction that's happening with Web 2.0. Well, we're pretty much at the end of this, and now we're moving into what's called Web 3.0. And the reason I called this Web X.0 is because the 1, 2, 3, I think that needs to kind of just go away, because we are in just web who knows what at this point. So what you're going to see coming up, some of this is a little bit shocking, like this next slide, okay? So what we have now is artificial intelligence starting to make decisions about what's on the web without human intervention. So here, this is a t-shirt that probably was never even manufactured or sold, but it was on the web for a little while until somebody said, well, you better take that down, because some artificial intelligent machines created that. Same with these diapers with the smartphone attachment. Just basically taking random things and putting them together and saying, here you go. All right? This is a link at the bottom. So I'm going to show you some videos from the current crazy web. This is a mishmash of artificial intelligence putting together animations for kids, and that's the title of one of their things.
Your kids, Mike?
Not my kids. They're too young or too old for that, but this is for little kids, and that's a title. It just kind of keeps truncating the things that they find on the internet that the machine decides is a good idea. The thing about artificial intelligence in the web is that it's delaminating content and author. So we also have articles that are being written by artificial intelligence, and we don't know where the information was, where it was retrieved from, how it was put together, and there's really no author to it. Now, companies are taking this and saying it belongs to company X, but still, I think this is a good description of what's actually happening out there with content. And this is, there's a fellow by the name of James Bridle, and he's the guy that I'm using for this particular segment of the presentation. All right, so what we have here is a list of videos for kids. You can see down there, they're kind of disturbing. Batman Eat, S-H-I-T, Princess Anna versus Joker Theft, Cream Pie Police Catch. I mean, machines are putting this together. Millions and millions of these videos now exist on the internet.
Bounce Patrol! Baby shark doo 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 doo. Baby shark doo 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 doo. Baby shark doo 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 doo. Baby shark. Mommy shark doo 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 doo. Mommy shark doo 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 doo. Mommy shark doo 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 doo. Mommy shark. Daddy shark doo 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 doo.
So this goes on for a long time, and we're not going to do that, obviously, but
Grandma shark doo 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 doo. Grandma shark doo doo.
So there are literally millions of these shark videos that they've taken this original one and then mashed it up and turned it into other videos. And if you have little kids, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Computers are doing this. Very strange. So it just goes on and on doing that. Same thing. So there's literally millions of those all over the place. Someone or something or some combination of people and things is using YouTube to systematically frighten, traumatize, and abuse children automatically and at scale, and it forces me to question my own beliefs about the internet at every level. That's James Trimble who wrote this. Let's see. This is so Baby Shark has penetrated our minds and is now being used at Camp LeJeune for marching. And I'm assuming most of these kids, most of these soldiers probably have kids, and that's where they said, you know, let's do Baby Shark. There's nothing wrong with this. I'm just showing you how it's permeating our minds and the culture. So this is James Bridle. This is some of his art. He's an artist from the UK, and he writes about the internet quite a bit. This is from a Medium article called "Something is Wrong on the Internet." And you know, he says, what concerns me is not just the violence being done to children. What concerns me is that this is just one aspect of a kind of infrastructural violence being done to all of us all the time, and we're still struggling to find a way to even talk about it, to describe its mechanisms and its actions and its effects. We really don't know what's going on here. So the thing is this is all taking place on the internet, right? So now we're going to get into a section about, well, what is the internet and who does it belong to and how does it work? So we currently have a battle of the cartels going on. On one side we have Facebook, Amazon, Google ecosystem. Uber and Airbnb are part of that. They're the ones that are on top of the transport, and they're dealing with the content. They're you know, Amazon, for example. Just yesterday I read that anybody who's fixing refurbished Macs, they're pretty much out of business now because Amazon made a deal with Apple that Apple will be doing all the refurbished work. So anybody that was selling refurbished Macs through Amazon, they're no longer on the platform. They've all been kicked off. So Amazon basically, built up these small businesses, and then now they're gone. So, and it happened in a matter of a couple days. These are the folks that are battling these. These are the two cartels that are going head to head, trying to grab market share and dominate your brain. Is basically what it comes down, and your pocketbook. After they get your brain, then it's the pocketbook. And on the right side there, that's all about transport. That's where the fiber, the coax, the copper, whatever, that's where the stuff is coming into your house, onto your phone, whatever. These are the guys that own that. This was I threw this slide in today. There's an article in the New York Times by Kara Swisher, who is an editor at Recode, and she wrote an article called "Taming the Teks, the Apex Predators of Tech," and her question was, how do we get consumers on top of the food chain for once? And that's what this is about. It's about us, being able to control, or at least have a say in what's happening to us that are being treated almost like a product. Okay. So there's a movement of the internet to become a public utility. Now, there's two types of utilities. There's an investor-owned utility and a publicly owned utility. Here's several examples of the two types of utilities. Investor-owned utilities are regulated, highly regulated by things like the California Public Utilities Commission. Public-owned utilities are regulated just because they belong to a municipality, and there's a democratic process to keep those folks in, open books, knowing what's getting built, that there's people that can vote and say, no, I don't want that to go there. Yes, I want it to go there. So those are the types of ownership and regulation for transport. So it's really important to understand that broadband has layers, and each layer has its own way of being viewed and handled economically and socially. So the actual infrastructure, that's the build part, requires financing and construction, and then it's owned by somebody, all right? Then there's the operations part. That can be a contractor in-house, it could be a managed service, there's truck rolls involved, there's a network operations center, cable plant, fiber to the premise equipment. The third layer is the connect layer. That's how your local network gets out to the world. That point of connection is actually a very contentious control point. And there's a lot of communities that are not able to connect because whoever has the bigger internet, like Comcast or AT&T, says, no, we're not gonna, you can build all the fiber you want, but we're not gonna connect you. We're very lucky in Nevada County because we have a scenic network that came through here about 3 or 4 years ago, and it's managed by Vast Networks, and they're very happy to connect. They would love to have you connect to them. So you can build a network in your neighborhood or in your municipality between Fresno and Colusa by way of Highway 49 and 20, and you can connect to the Vast Network and get out on the internet. Allow, that's where the open access and the free market thrives. It's called open access because if you break it down this way, that fourth layer is where anybody can get on and do things. So here's a video that, before that, this is the difference between open access and proprietary. That's Comcast over there on the right. So basically, what I call BOCA, finance, ownership, lots of options, owner decides, free market, that's all bundled into a box that you can't see. So, and they want you to think of it that way, that it's all one thing, but it's not, it's four things. And you can break those out, you can do all kinds of mix and match with those four things.
Broadband broadband networks have become an essential part of our lives. And yet many consumers are increasingly frustrated with their broadband service providers. Currently, incumbent operators control everything from network infrastructure, applications, speed, bandwidth, price, data limits, and the number of services available. All too often, consumers are left with poor service and few choices. It's a system of near monopoly that has stifled competition and innovation on the business side, as well as freedom and choice on the consumer side. Entry Point believes it's time to dismantle this model and open up the network by separating the network infrastructure from network services. The current providers can continue as network operators or as service providers, but should not exclusively perform both roles. The best model for all stakeholders is for municipalities or local utilities to install a software-defined fiber optic network, which is managed as a public utility. Broadband services can then be delivered in a cloud ecosystem where the private sector has an open invitation to compete and innovate. Think of it like the explosive growth in mobile applications before versus after the App Store on smartphones. The App Store gave innovators both a technology and business platform from which they could deliver new services. This new direction of dynamic open access and empowerment of customers will lead to similar innovation and networks that foster growth. And what's more, it's extremely simple for individuals to manage and subscribe to the services they want and need all in one place. For example, if an ISP does not deliver the quality and reliability a subscriber expects, they can dynamically cancel their ISP service and subscribe to a new ISP instantly. Many people think of broadband services as only internet, telephone, and TV. Entry Point's open networks and open APIs create a powerful and flexible platform that encourages innovation in areas as diverse as telemedicine, smart grid, distance learning, emergency communications, smart homes, transportation, private clouds, the Internet of Things, and smart city applications. With Entry Point's automated virtualization, subscribers can now slice their broadband connection into multiple private networks independent of their ISP. In other words, the user can decide on the fly whether they want to access a service over the public internet or over a private network for security, privacy, or quality of service reasons. Imagine being able to establish a secure private connection for online banking, or a private network between a home and local school where a student with special needs or an illness can attend classes remotely via video conferencing. Think of the smart grid and smart city applications that cannot run over the internet due to privacy and security concerns. All of these constraints are now removed with dynamic open access. It's time for the era of closed networks to end. When network infrastructure is open, service levels increase, applications expand, and costs fall. It makes for a much healthier business ecosystem in which companies can freely innovate and compete. When people have access to the best, state-of-the-art technology and services, they thrive, individually and as a community. Dynamic open access, the future of broadband networks.
That's just one company that does that service. There is another company called Coos, spelled C-O-S. They're in Europe, based out of Sweden. They have much of the market for providing that open access layer, that fourth layer in countries like Sweden and Germany, South Korea. So there's others, but so I wanted to talk about the types of jurisdictional ownership and oversight. There's a lot of different ways you can slice this. So if you're talking about that build, construct, and own portion, the first layer, you can build a community service district or what's called a community facilities district, depending on your state. There's obviously the municipal boundary, county, village, town, city. There's co-ops, and I'll talk about those in a second. In Idaho, they have what are called local improvement districts, where a bunch of people get together and they just form a boundary and they say, okay, we are going to now invest in something, in this case broadband, and we're going to have everybody covered by this local improvement district. MDUs is multiple dwelling units. That's a hotel, or not a hotel, an apartment complex or a large co-op building, in a city. There's gated communities, and those are overseen by what are called ROEs. That's a right of entry agreement. And so that's something that if you're building a broadband network or a water system or power, you're going to sign a ROE with the gated community or the MDU to decide, who owns the facility and how they're going to use it. And then you have some nonprofit mechanisms. The 501c12 is actually a nonprofit utility in the U.S. tax code, and a 501c3, which we're all pretty familiar with. And that leads me to Michael McLaughlin, who has actually built a local 501c3 called Backfill Network. Michael?
So, give you a really brief rundown.
Sorry.
So I'm Mike McLaughlin. I'm the CEO or president, I'm not even sure, of the 501c3 Backfill Networks. A group of neighbors and I pooled money and resources and formed a 501c3 nonprofit. And we are providing internet access to a pretty small number of homes, but a community along Newtown Road. We have fiber optic to a premise and then wireless to all the houses. So basically everything that Mike's talked about was a problem. Newtown Road has DSL at some locations, but anywhere that loses DSL no longer can get internet, period, on that road. A few people can get wireless from a few of the wireless providers, but it's pretty spotty even there. So there are literally houses that dial-up or satellite are the only options. And I was pretty much there at my house, and I need internet for my job. So I went to our local community organization, the Greater Champion Neighborhood Association, where I was able to meet enough people to come together to build it. We're fully self-bootstrapped. Everyone pitched in enough to cover the base expenses and installation of their house, and then
It's a very clever network. He's got the fiber going along, from Newtown Road where it taps into Vast, goes down to his house where he's got in his garage a fiber switch, right, with and then a cable that goes up to a tree to a ubiquity antenna that points to a tower that they built on a hill, and the paddles point out to the various members of the neighborhood association, and they have very nice speeds.
so we're everyone's getting between about 50 and 100 megabit, depending on how good of a connection they can make to one of the towers. We've got 3 access points right now. But I figured I'd give you a really brief rundown and then take a few questions if you want, or we can.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. So Mike is the I don't know, CIO or the head of IT at AJ Video. So he knows how to do this kind of stuff, and it comes easy to him because of that experience. But it's really, I think you've come up kind of with a playbook, right? Where, people could take what you've done and replicate it with not a whole lot of technical expertise, and it's not rocket science. It's plugging stuff in and tuning it up, and set.
Definitely a learning curve.
There's a curve, yeah.
So we were able. Yeah, the budget. So we started with 10. We waited till we got 10 members signed in. Everyone pitched in $1,000, and we were able to start and still have money in the bank at the end of getting 10 people hooked up. And that Yep. So $1,000 a household. And then we, a significant portion of that money actually went to a off-grid tower location. So we have solar power and batteries at one of the tower locations. So far less than that per household we were able to get going.
And didn't you, those who didn't want to come up with 1,000, they were able to finance that, and so they pay a higher price initially, and then it'll go down?
Yeah. So what we did initially, we had a higher rate at first, and then it's tapered down as we've added more users, more households, and as we continue to add new households, people's prices will go down commensurately, and we're offering $500 to join, but you pay the higher rate for a little while till you're back even with everyone else that pitched in more to begin with. So yeah, we're pretty flexible on the money basically.
But you know, it's open books. It's a neighborhood association. Everybody knows what's going on. There's no bundles. There's no goofing around. It's just here's what it costs, and this is how we're doing it. And it's very democratic.
How far I was from the fiber. So that's actually a very lucky point for us. There was a splice in the vast fiber line at Backfill Road and Newtown Road, which is part of how we came up with the name. It's about 120 feet to my garage, and it's all on public right away, or on. But the good news is the vast fiber runs all over the county. I mean, it's a pretty straight, only on one road at any given spot, but it does cross a lot of rural roads and a lot of areas. No, so it's going to go through Grass Valley, Nevada City, and then it goes down, goes down Newtown Road to Bitney Springs Road and out that way. There's a lot of roads though. McCourtney has it along there for part of it.
It covers a lot. You'd be surprised at where it goes. There's a lot of people that could do exactly what he's done. So it starts in Bakersfield, okay, connects to the Tier 1 internet on I-5, crosses over to 99, goes up to Fresno, goes up to Fresno, and then it hits 49. 49, it picks up all the communities along Highway 49 to Nevada City, and then it heads back down Newtown Road and goes actually to Englebright, and then cuts over back to 20, and then connects back to 5 to the big Tier 1 internet in Colusa. And there's going to be enough fiber. They have enough conduit there. They'll be able to populate with fiber for 100 years. So we're actually in really good shape.
It does. It takes a lot of zigzags off of 49. It goes to a lot of schools and government buildings, which is how they got the grant to build it.
I'm working with a gated community in a town called El Dorado, south of Placerville, 28 homes, and we're going to connect them all with fiber, and they're going to build it themselves, and it's going to connect to the vast network. No, and that's part of the problem with the connect part of the layer 3, because you can't, and Peter, you can talk to this. You can't get a map of AT&T, Comcast, Verizon, where their fiber goes. It's all over this county. Good luck. They will not tell you.
Yeah, I mean, if I may, in my experience.
So the co-op, I would like to talk about, there's a network here locally that you may not know about called Plumas Sierra. It's in Sierra County, and it's a rural electrical co-op. If you're in Sierra County, you live in Portola or Beckworth or Quincy, you can't get the time of day from the big boys. So they built their own electrical network. They said, the heck with it. We live here and we need electricity. So, and there's a lot of rural electrical co-ops all over the country. A lot more are on the East Coast, following the model of the Tennessee Valley Authority, when electricity, and Susan Crawford in her book uses that analogy of how when electricity was first starting to get rolled out, it was only the rich people that were able to really have enough electricity to do neat things with it. It was usually just one light bulb in the house, and that was it. So what would happen is somebody with a lot of money would say, hey, I want a 100 amp service, and then I'm going to have a refrigerator, and I'm going to have a vacuum cleaner, I'm going to have a toaster. Soon as it was made a decision that everybody's going to have a 100 amp service, suddenly the toaster industry, the vacuum cleaner industry, and the refrigerator industries just exploded. Same analogy with what's going to happen with broadband if we can just get the fiber to everybody, all right? So that's what this is really about. And the incumbents, the telcos, they're not going to do it. They're going to do it on their schedule. And they're going to do it only in the places where they have a 35% take rate or more. And if you are not in that category, tough beans. So the Sierra Plumas network in Sierra County, I believe 12 or 15 years ago, they decided we can do broadband too. They now have fiber going to the premise in Sierra County in many locations, okay? Because they were able to do it. It's a co-op, and it's about voluntary open membership, democratic member control, member economic participation. So if there's a surplus, it goes back to the members. Autonomy and independence. There's an education, training, and information part of that. Co-ops all cooperate with each other all over the country. So I like the co-op model. I think that's a great one for a group of people that want to get broadband done. And I think you can take networks like what Mike's done and have those all work together in a co-op that's sort of virtual. I would like to see that model happen. So fiber, it has to be fiber. You know, we're kind of done with the copper world, and that's really important. Active Ethernet is where there's a dedicated fiber to the premise as opposed to a shared fiber. The coax model we currently have with Comcast is shared. So when 6 o'clock rolls around, things slow down. Not so much here anymore. Comcast has totally boosted their speed, and a lot of that is because race showed up, and now they're trying to mess with their take rate. Underground versus aerial for lots of obvious reasons. It is a little bit more expensive, but in the long run, it's the better way to go. And really important concept, wireless and wireline are not competitive. They are complementary technologies. So if you hear AT&T saying, hey, you don't need fiber, we've got 5G, we're going to take care of everything. It's going to be wonderful. That's not, no, wrong. It's got to be it's both. Yes, there will be 5G, but it's going to be doing certain things. It's not really an appropriate technology for what you're doing at your home. This is a list of current vendors in Nevada County that are the private vendors. Okay, thank you. That's it. So any questions? So what can we do in Nevada County to help this along? Is that what you asked? Yeah. So part of the reason I did this presentation is because I wanted to kind of burst that bundle idea that those 4 layers are you have to put them all together in one package. If you take them apart and look at each one differently, then you can say, okay, this is what I want the transport build to look like. This is who I think should be operating this. This is how I think we should connect. And then I would like to have the ability to have multiple vendors compete for my phone system, my dial-up or my internet ISP, my content, my video content, and everything else that as you saw in the entry point video, the kinds of services that will start to burgeon once that 4th layer is freed up. Okay, so what happens now is you've got it's called free pricing, or I can't remember what the term is, but you'll have companies like AT&T and Comcast that'll say, oh, well, we're going to give you home security services for $2 a month for a year. So what that does is it wipes out anybody else that wants to do home security services because they've bundled into the plan and they've made it very, very low price part of your bundle. So it hides that kind of stuff, right? And then later on, then the price starts going up, but meanwhile all the competition's been wiped out. So that's what we're looking at. So educating your friends, your fellow business associates, talking to political figures, saying, hey, this is how I understand the internet works. What are you guys doing about helping us get this spread out and get more fiber put in the ground or to the premises? If you look at where things are right now, Comcast has got high-speed coax. They've rolled out their gig product again, and that was very nicely timed for when the race project was approved. I couldn't get AT&T or Comcast to give me the time of day 2 years ago, and now I just had a guy from AT&T show up, and he's got new AT&T fiber at my office in Nevada City, and the prices are way lower than they used to be for AT&T fiber. But he didn't know, this guy, it was kind of unfortunate because he didn't know that race existed. So we had a little chat, and I said, so this is what race's price is. And he was like, that's impossible. How am I going to match that? And I was like, well, I don't know. But obviously you were sent here to compete with Race and Comcast, because now suddenly you're seeing your sweet spots go away. And, but we shouldn't have to have it. That's not the kind of competition we want. The transport is not where competition should be. You can't possibly have 7 different fiber lines to every house. That's just silly.
So Michael, the parallels
Yeah. So Tim's question is about private-owned utilities, public-owned utilities, and how do you scale that so that it actually works for a lot of people. So what's happening right now is that communities that have Comcast, for example, are saying, you know what, that's great, but we need a municipal model. So there's currently a network being designed and hopefully built in a couple of years in Reading, of all places. Okay, there is Davis is looking at one. If you go into other states, Ammon, Idaho, which is next to Twin Falls, that's a community of about 40,000 people. They had a company called Cable One, kind of their Comcast. They overbuilt that municipal network using entry point networks, open access, and they're paying for gig service about $40 a month. Yeah. And they built it out slowly. They're the ones that do the local improvement district model. But again, it was just about the politicians getting together. It's actually if you Google Ammon, Idaho, it's a really interesting story. It all came out of the CIO of Ammon, Idaho's government, and he created an app that did a shot stopper. The local high school said, we need to know when there's an active shooter in the area. And he created this app, but he needed a cloud portion of that, and he needed fiber. So he went to the city manager and said, I need fiber from here to here. What do you think? And they said, just go do it. So he did it. And then neighbors were like, what are you doing? Oh, we're putting fiber in. Can I have some? And that's what happened. So it just grew out, and now all 40,000 people in Ammon, Idaho have this amazing municipal fiber utility. And it's a very conservative area. A lot of people at first said, wait a minute, what about competition? What about the free market? Again, transport's not where the free market is. It's at that layer 4. That's where it's at the application layer. It's open access, and they have that the video you saw where they click on and change their ISP service dynamically. That's from there. And if you look at Twin Falls and Ammon, Idaho, side by side, there's a before and after picture that's on the internet that's amazing. They were both just kind of these fields, and then Ammon, Idaho, there's a road that has the line between the cities, and on the Ammon side, it's all tilt-up buildings, and they've got a whole bunch of new manufacturing facilities that were built there. And now Twin Falls is like, we want some of that too, so they're going to build their own. So you can, Fort Collins, Chattanooga, Wilson, North Carolina. There's a bunch of stuff happening in North Carolina. So going back to the Susan Crawford book, She talks about 5 communities in the United States, 3 that did it right and 2 that are not doing it right. Nevada City's in here. We're in the not doing it right category. I encourage you to get this book. It's available at Harmony Books in Nevada City. Stacy there, I told her to get a bunch of copies. They're sitting on the shelf. You can buy that book. And it will talk about our community and all these other communities. Chattanooga is the poster child for they've had a municipal fiber network now for almost 20 years. And it has transformed that community. They went from brownfields and, a devastated manufacturing base, and now it's full of young people doing gig work, and there's incubator buildings all over the place. The old brick buildings have been transformed. So,
Michael, can I share my story about
please.
AT&T? My name's Andrew Wilkinson. I will have
It's not a technology issue. It's not a financing issue. It's a political issue. It's politics. That's where we need to work this and get past the barriers. And the thing is, I talked earlier about how the rest of the world is eating our lunch on this subject, and they're building fiber optic networks. South Korea is number 1. They have 100,000 small cell 5Gs in Seoul right now, and they are doing self-driving cars and all the other things that 5G is going to bring. 5G doesn't exist without fiber. You have to have fiber to get 5G to work. They're complementary. All right, well, thank you very much. That was a really invigorating conversation, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.